If you hold 300 XRP, you might be sitting on far more value than you realize. Not because of hype, not because of speculation, and not because of anything retail traders are doing, but because of a shift happening inside the deepest part of the global financial system. A shift so significant that a settlement researcher at the Bank for International Settlements said the next few years will redefine how value moves across borders and what assets become essential to that movement. Welcome back to Matrix Millionaire. Before we go deeper, hit like so more XRP holders get this information. Subscribe so you never miss what is happening behind the scenes. And drop a comment telling me how many years you have been holding XRP. And as always, nothing in this video is financial advice. It is informational only, and you must always make your own decisions. Right now, XRP sits in the low double-digit cent range, looking quiet, still, and almost forgotten. Retail investors think this means nothing is happening. But that silence is exactly what the BIS researcher said appears right before a settlement rail transitions into a new phase. He explained that global liquidity systems do not reprice assets loudly. They reprice them quietly, long before the chart catches up. 300 XRP may look small, but it is not small when the settlement layer of the global economy is shifting. Because once an asset becomes part of the digital infrastructure that banks, institutions, and sovereign liquidity desks rely on, even a modest position can become disproportionately valuable. The BIS researcher described it like this: the world is entering a phase where tokenization is accelerating faster than settlement systems can support. Government bonds are being tokenized. Money market funds are being tokenized. Interbank liquidity is preparing to move onto digital rails. But all of this becomes useless unless those digital assets can settle across borders instantly and at scale. That is the exact problem XRP was designed to solve. He said something striking, that the next generation of cross-border settlement will require a neutral, liquid, real-time bridge asset. Not a currency controlled by any one government, not a permissioned system with political influence, but an open, fast, scalable asset that sits above the entire system. That is where XRP fits in. That is where your 300 XRP becomes far more meaningful than it seems. The BIS researcher explained that, during settlement system transitions, the public float of the bridge asset begins tightening long before utility becomes obvious. Liquidity migrates. Supply is absorbed. Corridors prepare quietly. And because institutions accumulate in silence, retail never realizes the repricing has started until it is already underway. This is your retention spike, because what he said next is what most people never hear. Once a bridge asset becomes operational inside even a handful of tokenized settlement corridors, the value is not determined by the price history. It is determined by the liquidity it replaces, the inefficiency it eliminates, and the volume it settles. In other words, the value comes from what XRP will do, not what XRP was. 300 XRP becomes powerful when the world needs a bridge asset, not a speculative asset. 300 XRP becomes meaningful when institutions must hold it, not trade it. 300 XRP becomes valuable when the system requires it, not when influencers talk about it. The BIS researcher said this phase always looks boring from the outside, but that is the disguise. Because quiet charts are not signals of weakness, they're signals of preparation, and we are in that preparation phase right now. To understand why a BIS settlement researcher believes your 300 XRP may be far more valuable than it looks today, you have to understand the mechanism behind how global financial systems actually transition. Because markets do not reprice assets based on emotion. They reprice them based on structural necessity. And right now, the structure of global settlement is being strained in ways the retail market cannot see. He explained that the financial world is entering a point of no return. Tokenized value is exploding, not in hype cycles, but in real institutional systems. Sovereign bonds are being digitized. Interbank liquidity is shifting to programmable settlement formats. Reserve currencies are testing tokenized cash. But here's the part nobody understands. Tokenization means nothing without real-time settlement. If assets move digitally but settle slowly, the entire system collapses under its own weight. That is exactly why a neutral bridge asset becomes essential. And XRP is the only asset designed from day one to bridge currencies, liquidity pools, tokenized assets, and cross-border rails without belonging to any one government or central bank. The BIS researcher said that when a settlement asset becomes necessary, not optional, the repricing begins before the public even realizes what is happening. Institutions do not wait for confirmation. They prepare long before the transition becomes visible. They move liquidity into positions that will matter on the new rails. They secure what they need quietly, without attracting attention. And while retail investors look at charts, institutions look at infrastructure. This is the mechanism you must understand. Quiet periods in assets like XRP are not dead zones. They are loading zones. They are moments where liquidity migrates off exchanges, where corridors test silently, where wallets consolidate, where supply tightens, and where institutional footprints appear in places retail never checks. This is what is happening right now. 300 XRP does not feel like much in a speculative environment, but in a settlement environment, it becomes a piece of a much larger, much more valuable puzzle. Because once banks, payment providers, and tokenized settlement networks lock XRP into their rails, the available supply drops, not gradually, permanently. XRP held inside settlement corridors does not come back onto exchanges. It stays absorbed into infrastructure. And that is why your bag could be worth more than you think, because the system is transitioning from a world where XRP is traded to a world where XRP is used. He explained that every financial transition has two phases, the invisible one and the visible one. Retail only sees the visible phase, the price movement, the announcements, the adoption headlines. But the invisible phase is where the real repricing begins. It is where institutions quietly build their positions. It is where utility begins before anyone knows utilities have started. It is where the chart sleeps, but the system wakes up. We are in that invisible phase right now. You can see it in the liquidity patterns. You can see it in how sell-side depth is shrinking. You can see it in dormant addresses coming alive. You can see it in Ripple's strategic silence. You can see it in corridor behavior in regions like Singapore, Japan, and the Middle East. These are the footprints of a settlement layer preparing itself. And once the visible phase begins, retail will swear it happened out of nowhere. They always do. But the truth is that the repricing happens long before the public notices. And the BIS researcher was clear. We are already in that realignment window. 300 XRP during speculation is small. 300 XRP during a settlement transition is positioning. The BIS settlement researcher said something that most people will never hear, and even fewer will ever understand. He said that by the time the world publicly recognizes the settlement asset, it's already too late to position for its real value. Because the market does not wait for the crowd. The market moves for the system. And when the system needs something, it does not ask for permission. It simply transitions. Look at XRP right now. Retail sees boredom. They see a flat chart. They see silence. But the silence is the signal. It is the exact environment settlement networks always pass through before activation. This is the part where liquidity shifts quietly. This is the part where institutions prepare discreetly. This is the part where the repricing has technically already begun, just not in a way the public can detect. The researcher explained that financial systems never telegraph their transitions. They hide them. They move them into the background. They keep them quiet until the new rails are ready. XRP is sitting in that quiet right now, the exact quiet that always comes before something structural changes. And this is why your 300 XRP could be worth more than you think. Because the value of a bridge asset is not defined by its current price. It is defined by the role it will play when the world's financial plumbing rewires itself. When the settlement layer flips from slow to instant. When tokenized value needs a neutral asset to move. When banks need to eliminate trapped liquidity. When cross-border rails are forced to modernize. In that world, the world that is already forming behind the scenes, 300 XRP is not small. It is not insignificant. It is not just a little. It is positioning inside a global transition that most people will not believe until they watch it happen in real time. The quiet repricing has already started. You can see it in the tightening supply. You can see it in the clustering wallets. You can see it in the thinning depth. You can see it in the institutional accumulation patterns hiding behind the stillness. You can see it in the silence from the very people who know exactly what phase this ecosystem is entering. Most people will not understand any of this until the chart moves. But you do not need the chart to wake you up. You just heard the part of the story retail never gets to hear. And because you heard it now, before the world opens its eyes, your 300 XRP sits in a very different light than it did yesterday. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I want you to type the word aligned in the comments right now. That single word tells me you see what others cannot. It tells me you stayed with me until the final moment. And it tells the algorithm that you are part of a small group who understands how the world really transitions. Tap like so more XRP holders get the truth. Subscribe to Matrix Millionaire so you never miss the signals beneath the surface. And comment aligned to lock in your spot among the viewers who saw the bigger picture. The quiet will not last forever. The system is already shifting. And your bag may be worth far more than you think.